This video is brought to you by Ground News. Today, Hong Kong passes an even stricter security law, protests break out in Cuba, and TLDR News makes a big announcement. From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Wednesday the 20th of March, 2024. Our main story today is that Hong Kong has passed a tough new security law in a move to crack down on dissidents. The bill, which was passed in the territory's Legislative Council on Tuesday, imposes maximum penalties of life imprisonment for crimes like treason and broadens the definition of state secrets to include information about the economy, technological or scientific development of Hong Kong or mainland China. It comes a few years after Beijing first imposed a national security law on Hong Kong back in 2020, which followed months of violent pro-democracy protests. The pro-Beijing members of Hong Kong's de facto parliament say the new law will counter espionage and ensure stability in the city, while critics say it will restrict civil society and promote censorship. China has also hit back at the UK and other governments, which have denounced the law, known as Article 23. Britain's Foreign Secretary David Cameron claimed the legislation was rushed through after Hong Kong's leader, Chief Executive John Lee, urged lawmakers to approve it at full speed. In response, the Chinese embassy in London issued an irritated statement on Tuesday night, asking the UK to stop making baseless accusations against it. It said the remarks from the British side are a serious distortion of the facts and constitute grave interferences in China's internal affairs. So what does the new law actually mean in practice? Well, it focuses on 5 types of crimes: treason, insurrection, sabotage that endangers national security, external interference in Hong Kong's affairs, and espionage and theft of state secrets. Those found guilty of treason and insurrection can be punished with life imprisonment, while those found guilty of espionage and sabotage, including cyber attacks, can be imprisoned for up to 20 years. It also allows those found guilty of working with external forces, a vague category which includes foreign governments and businesses, as well as international organisations, to be imprisoned for an extra 2 to 3 years. Finally, it also gives heavier penalties for sedition, including inciting hatred against the Chinese Communist Party leadership, which is punishable by up to 10 years in jail. Police have also been given new powers to arrest national security suspects for up to 16 days without charge, compared to just 48 hours previously. There's more on the way, but be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to make the daily briefing part of your daily routine, or just search for us on your podcast app to listen along. Next up, we're getting a little meta with some TLDR news. It was announced yesterday that we're going to be expanding our partnership with Nebula. That's right, not only are we uploading all of our videos to Nebula, but we're also helping to curate the brand new Nebula News feature, with TLDR News CEO Jack Kelly also taking on the role of editorial director at Nebula News. Nebula News is the new home of journalism on Nebula, where the TLDR team will be pulling together the biggest stories of the day and highlighting important videos and topics you might have otherwise missed. If you're a TLDR fan already, that makes Nebula News kind of like a curated way to watch our favourite videos and check out what we're paying attention to, with the help of some superb creators, including Wendover, Real Life Law, Legal Eagle, and more. In fact, Real Life Law even have a brand new original series called War Room, which is exclusively on Nebula. You can read Nebula CEO Dave Wiskus' full press release, linked in the description. And if you want to support us and check out this new project, then it's less than £2 a month for a Nebula subscription, and clicking the link below means that they know that you came from us. In other news, rare protests broke out in Cuba in recent days amid food shortages and power cuts. Miguel Diaz-Canel, the country's president and head of the ruling Communist Party, said his government was ready to attend to the complaints of our people, listen, dialogue, explain the many efforts that are being carried out to improve the situation. Cuba has been struggling with an economic crisis that has worsened since the pandemic, as high inflation, a devalued currency, power cuts, and shortages of food, fuel, and medicine have prompted a record number of Cubans to flee to the United States, more than 400,000 in the past 2 years. The Cuban government points to the decades-old US embargo of Cuba as being behind its economic woes. The US imposed an embargo on the island in the early 60s, after Fidel Castro came to power in the Cuban Revolution. Under the presidency of Barack Obama, the US moved to relax the embargo. This was ultimately reversed by Donald Trump, who clamped down harder on Cuba, and his successor, incumbent President Biden, has done relatively little to change the Trump-era approach. At the same time, botched reforms and unpopular price hikes by the government have fueled the popular discontent. Anyway, we have a full video on the crisis, the protests, and what it means for the future of Cuba's government coming out on TLDR News Global on Thursday. Brazil's ex-president Jair Bolsonaro is facing his first criminal charges since leaving office, with police accusing him of falsifying his own COVID vaccination record. According to the indictment, Bolsonaro, who publicly doubted the severity of COVID and the effectiveness of the vaccine, allegedly conspired with others to enter false data into the health ministry's systems in order to issue false certificates to obtain undue advantages. It's alleged that this was done before he travelled to the United States, which required travellers to be vaccinated to enter at the time. A Bolsonaro spokesperson called the accusation absurd, adding that, while serving as president, Bolsonaro was completely exempt from presenting any type of certificate on his trips. Nevertheless, if convicted, he could in theory be jailed for up to 12 years. This is far from Bolsonaro's only legal trouble. He's being investigated in separate probes for his role in trying to overturn the results of the 2022 election, his alleged attempt to keep state gifts, plus he remains barred from office for 8 years for undermining the electoral system. And perhaps most bizarrely, he's under investigation for allegedly harassing a whale off the coast of Sao Paulo while riding a jet ski. And finally, in some uplifting medical news, researchers from the University of Amsterdam say they've used CRISPR gene editing technology to eliminate HIV from infected cells in a laboratory. The scientists say these findings represent a pivotal advancement towards designing a cure strategy, but stress that their work is a proof of concept and that any cure is a long way away. There is no cure for HIV. However, the difference between now and when HIV first emerged is remarkable. These days, an HIV diagnosis is not a death sentence, and those who start antiretroviral therapy promptly can live as long as HIV-negative people, with treatment able to reduce the risk of transmission to effectively zero. With all this news around the world, it's easy to feel overwhelmed not knowing what's coming next. But lucky for you, our sponsor Ground News is your ultimate tool for easily navigating news coverage. Their app and website creates really comprehensive story overviews on any topic, so you can easily compare how news is covered across the world and political spectrum. For every article reporting on a story, you'll see the source's political bias, how factual they are, and even who owns them. For example, this story about Rishi Sunak refusing to rule out a May general election. Not only can I see that there are 7 sources reporting, I can quickly identify which sources have a political bias according to ratings from independent news monitoring organisations. What's interesting about this story is that it's mostly being covered by 4 left-leaning news outlets and only 1 right-leaning outlet. I also especially like their blind spot feed, which shows you stories that are underreported by either side of the political spectrum. For example, if you lean right, you might have missed this story about the US House of Representatives voting on a TikTok ban. It's unlike any other news app you've come across, so go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link down in the description to get 40% off unlimited access to their Vantage plan. That's only $5 a month to help an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.